Good evening. My name is John Henry, and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action and Study seminar, we're going to go through the first 164 pages of the Big Book, the recovery section, and we're going to do the work that the first 100 people who recovered said we have to do to overcome this hopeless condition of mind and body. I borrow heavily from the Golden Slippers, from Joe and Charlie, from Clancy, and from all of the giants who have gone before me. Now, I don't claim to be any big book guru or any kind of top 10 spiritualist. I'm just a simple drunk. I was almost dead from the disease. When I finally became willing to do the action in our book, I was able to recover and have a pretty good life. So I'm hoping that there's 2s and 3s and 4s of you listening to this together. You're going to need a big book. I like the large print big book, highlighter and pen. I'm going to try to get some of the paperwork that I've got online. And please bring your willingness. Please bring your willingness and your open mind. And as you're going to see, we open every session with the set-aside prayer so that we may be more open to receiving this information. Thanks for listening. Good evening, everybody. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, John.
During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered, unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Peace. So we talked about the 5th step last week, and I always ask, did anybody manage to get their 5th step done? All right. Hey, come on in, man. Good to see you.
Saturday.
Sweet. Okay. Well, let's. Do you want to just tell us briefly, just a few minutes how it went? I mean, if you don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It went really well. We just kind of talked through things, and then we looked at my part in it. And then I went home and I spent an hour just, praying on it and thinking on it. And I just felt hugely uplifted and relieved. And it felt like I had a new outlook on life afterwards. Is that what you wanted to hear?
It's funny.
Did you want to hear more about my experience doing it, or what?
No, that was fantastic. I just wanted to hear. That was absolutely wonderful.
Okay, I didn't know. I didn't mean, is that what you wanted to hear? I just wanted to hear more about it.
I did have, I think I said last week, I had one of my sponsees called me back after a couple hours and was all freaked out because he thought he was the worst guy ever, I told him, that it's simply not true, and we discussed why he felt like that. But we talked about what he was trying to do with his life and how God, is forgiving him and me because I did many of the things he did. And I said I think that his feelings would change over the next couple days or weeks, which indeed they did. He after about a week, he had a wonderful sense of relief. But he was freaking out a little bit right afterwards. Some of us, like me, I felt relief. And I don't know if I was just happy that I was done with it or what, but I did feel a lot of relief.
Well, and I have to say that I'm really not a person that shares, and that's
Yep.
one thing my sponsor said that I need to be better at is to, open up and share.
Sure.
And so, I did kind of have a little bit of a relapse on Monday, a few things happened. And she said, that's where you just call me. So now the big picture's out, and now it's just like little things here and there, and it's just, I don't know, it's just like I said, a new outlook on life. So.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt some relief at first,
Yeah.
but now the days are going on, I did it on Sunday, and now every day I feel lighter and lighter, It's like today I'm like, hello,
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Cool. Anybody else want to talk a little bit?
I do mine this Saturday.
This Saturday. Okay, we'll
This
get you next
Saturday.
week. All right. All right. Well, fantastic. Do you have one of these?
Oh, I need.
Okay, fantastic.
I need one. How much are they?
$5.
Thank
All right. So, funny enough, the steps. I mean, once we do all this work in the 4th step, and we do our 5th step. And then they say go home and relax for an hour, right? And then we jump right back into it. I think the book, and we'll read. We're going to read just a little bit out of the big book today, mainly out of the 12 and 12. But I think when we do read the book, we're going to read it at the end of the session. I think what they're telling us is right after we do the 5th step, we do 6 and 7. People say entirely ready. I mean, I know a lot of people that I know, they use that as they kind of use it as an excuse to delay going forward. But we're going to see what both the book and the 12 and 12 says. So we are in the 12 by 12 today. I mean, did anybody else want to say anything? Good? Okay. All right. We are in the 12 by 12 today, and we are going to be starting on step 6. So that means we are on page 63. So there's a lot, and I love this session because this is a lifetime job. These character defects, because if you're anything like me, they keep cropping up. And now that I've done the 4th and 5th step, I'm more able to see what they are, and I'm more able to see them when they crop up. And sometimes when I do stuff at 5.5 years sober, I say, "Oh my God, how could you have done that? Haven't you learned anything?" And I start to beat myself up. But my book tells me that I can't do that. My book says, "Hey, you know what? We're humans. We're gonna make mistakes, and we're gonna see. Once we do steps 8 and 9, we're gonna see that we have steps 10 to take care of that. And the book says that we are going to continue to make mistakes, and that's okay." So anyway, let's go to page 63 in the 12 and 12, and we're going to start out by writing something at the top of the page. Let's write. We got just a ton of writing and highlighting. This stuff is just so cool. This stuff. After the 5th step, get rid of isolation. Okay. After 5th step, get rid of isolation. Do you not have one? You got to have one. Here.
I have like 3 of them at home.
Well, you can at least follow along in this.
Yes, okay.
There, you got to at least follow along. After 5th step, get rid of isolation. Move towards dependence upon God. Move towards dependence upon God. And that's mixing calamity with serenity. Mixing calamity with serenity. After 5th step, get rid of isolation. Move towards dependence upon God. Mixing calamity with serenity. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Okay. Let's underline that first sentence. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. You know, obviously written in the context of the 50s, or the girls from the ladies, or the adults from the children, whatever you want to say. And you can, right next to that, you can write Reverend Sam Shoemaker. He got Abby Thatcher sober. Reverend Sam Shoemaker, I believe he ran the Calvary Mission for the Oxford group in New York City, I think. But Reverend Sam Shoemaker said that. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable, highlight the next 4 lines, of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservations whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually. So we're going to go back, and we're going to, even though we highlighted it, we're going to underline willingness and honesty. We're going to underline repeatedly, and we're going to circle all. So what that's telling us is, you know, when my character defects, they crop back up, you know, right here it tells me, hey, that's going to happen. We have to try this repeatedly. We're not just going to get the $9.99 special and be fixed. That's not going to happen. It's going to take work. It's going to take prayer. And it's something we're going to work on for the rest of our life. On all his faults, without any reservation whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually, and is therefore entitled to be called a man who is sincerely, highlight to the end of the paragraph, trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own Creator. Okay, so that is, after own Creator, you can write goal of step 6. That's the goal of step 6. To grow in the image and likeness of his own Creator, right? Or whatever our higher power is. Of course, the often disputed question of whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered with a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be just about the largest fact in his life. He will usually offer his proof in a statement like this. Sure, I was beaten, absolutely licked. Underline this little sentence. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Next to that, we're going to write step 1. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got no place with my alcoholism. Okay, remember that ABC in the big book? Let me see, that no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. These are some people that tried, right? Family, friends, doctors, clergymen, they all tried and they couldn't do it. Got no place with my alcoholism. Highlight to the end of the page. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house, next to clean house, write 4th step, and then asked a higher power, God as I understood him, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. So, you know, for a lot of people, somewhere in here when they do their 4th step, and this happened to me, my obsession, I had a pretty heavy obsession to drink, and I was fighting it, and somewhere in the 4th and 5th step, that obsession to drink was lifted out of me. And I mean, I drank and used drugs for almost every day for 35 years. And for that obsession to be lifted was quite a miracle. At the bottom of the page, let's write dependence upon God and remaining teachable. Dependence upon God and remaining teachable. You know, that's one thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, most alcoholics, they come in here and they think they know everything. I know I did. When I worked these steps and I went through it, I saw that I was wrong about so many things, just about everything, as a matter of fact. So we're going to highlight, we're going to circle anytime you see the word release. In AA meetings all over the world, statements just like this are heard daily. It is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release, circle release, from this very obstinate and potentially fatal obsession. So in a very complete and literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. Next to that paragraph, off to the right, nothing to do with willpower. Right? We discovered when we did the doctor's opinion that willpower did not work. So this is nothing to do with willpower. Having been granted a perfect release, circle release again, from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release, circle release, from every other difficulty or defect? This is a riddle of our existence, the full answer to which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least a part of the answer to it is apparent to us. So they're wondering, God removed our obsession to drink, and that was a perfect release. Why can't we do so with the rest of our defects? When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit a most unnatural act. Defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation, highlight the next 5 words, they seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct. As they are humbled, circle the word humbled, and then highlight the terrific beating administered by alcohol, right, just that. The grace of God can enter them and expel their obsession. Here, their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully with their Creator's desire to give them new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. Okay, so where we underline the terrific beating, right, utter hopelessness. And I used to think, at the end there where it said, for nature and God alike abhor suicide, I thought they were talking about like me with my plans to kill myself. But but they're also talking about the fact that we're pouring so much alcohol down our throats that we're killing ourselves that way as well. We're bent upon self-destruction just by the very act of how much we're drinking. But most of our other difficulties don't fall under such a category at all. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, to reproduce, to be somebody in the society of his fellows. Okay, next to that, just write third column. Okay, remember all those sheets that I gave you, right? That's the third column, our basic instincts of life, right? That's what we looked at. We looked at how our resentments, our fears, and the harms we do others were affecting our basic instincts. And he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things. Indeed, God made him that way. He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol. Highlight just that last little line. But he did give man instincts to help him stay alive. Right? So next to the bottom 2 lines there, write natural ambitions. And you can always refer back to all those sheets from the 4-step. Natural ambitions. And at the bottom of the page, we're going to write something. We're going to write, I engage in self-destructive acts. I engage in self-destructive acts. And I mean, for many of us, just the amount of alcohol we drank, and for some of us, we actually were contemplating suicide, and we were doing things that were very dangerous to our lives. I engage in self-destructive acts. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us to fully eliminate our instinctual drives. So far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed from any human being all his natural drives. So underline natural drives. And again, write third column. Right? That's the third column here, right? That's our social instinct, our security instinct, our sex instinct, and our ambitions for the future. Right? That's when these things become threatened, that's when we become angry, that's when we become full of fear. And that's when we harm people. Right? When those things are threatened. And we discovered that when we were doing our 4-step. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, It isn't strange that we often let these far exceed, underline far exceed, and just next to that write warped third column. And you guys can look over your 4-step that you did. Look at that third column. That's a warped third column. Far exceed their intended purpose. Okay, now we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible or due us, that is the point at which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, of our sins. So after the word sins, you can write Greek, and then quotation marks to miss the mark. That's what the word where the word sins comes from the Greek, and it means to miss the mark. Right? So we're running out, at least I was, right? I wanted more than my share of people to think I was somebody who I wasn't. I wanted more than my share of personal relationships. I wanted security instinct. I wanted more than my share of money. I wanted more than my share of emotional support from people. Sex, obviously, I wanted more than my share of sex. And then my ambitions, right? I had great social ambitions, security ambitions, and sexual ambitions. I thought that if I would satisfy those things, I would be happy. And I spent a lot of time trying to satisfy those. And when they did not make me happy, I ended up just drinking more and going after more, and it was kind of a vicious cycle. You know, I was taught that if I made a lot of money and I had a nice house and a car and a girlfriend and a wife, that I would be happy. But as it turns out, without God in my life, I was not. So let's see here. To miss the mark. If we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions. By the way, the 6th and 7th step and the 12 and 12, I had to read this many, many times for it to sink in. So don't feel bad if it's going over your head. It went over my head the first 6 times I read it. If we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions, but in no case does He render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. That is something we are supposed to highlight just that one line. We are supposed to be willing to work towards ourselves. Okay, that little line right there. And then we can write my actions. My actions. We are willing to work towards ourselves. He asks only that we try as best we know how, highlight, to make progress in the building of character. Okay, so, you know, you hear people talk about doing esteemable acts to gain your self-esteem. After building of character, we can write, starting to be okay with me. Many of us come in here and we think we're the worst people on earth. Right? We're going to do our 4th step and our 5th step, and we're going to start to change our behavior. And all of a sudden, we're going to start to be okay with ourselves, and we're not going to think that we're that lousy person anymore. So step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way, highlight to lifetime job, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. Okay, and then I want you to underline attitude and underline lifetime. And let's go to the bottom of the page and let's write the word attitude. Write the word attitude, and let's put equals angle of approach. That's a definition out of an aviation dictionary. Attitude equals angle of approach. So let's say, for example, there's somebody that goes to AA meetings that I go to, and in my head, I label this fellow. I say, whenever that guy talks, I don't like what he says. I think that he's wrong, and he's got no business being here. And I mean, if I think that way and I label him that way, every time this fellow I see him or every time he speaks, I'm going to be disappointed, right? So if I change that from saying I don't like this guy and he's completely wrong to this fellow has some very interesting ideas, and I certainly might not agree with them, but I think some of them are interesting and funny, and I really want to hear what he says. If I look at it that way, that's changing my angle of approach. And then whenever I see him or I hear him speak, I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to want to hear what he says. Angle of approach, right? And even if you've got somebody that you don't like, right? And you see that person and there he is again. You know what? You smile at that person, you say hello, you shake their hand, and you treat them better. That's changing your angle of approach, and that's going to just have a dramatic effect. People don't know what the hell's going on. This is a program of action. And how we think and how we feel is not what our spiritual barometer is about at all. It's how we act. It's how we act towards other people. It's what we do, right? I mean, we're all human. We're going to have some thoughts and we're going to have some feelings. Anybody can have a bad day. At the end of the day, they're not going to say, little Johnny was feeling pretty bad that day. You know, they're going to say, this is what John did on that day. So we have to change our actions, our angle of approach. This does not mean that we expect all of our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. Oh, I'm sorry. Next to that sentence we just highlighted off to the right. Who I am and what can I be? Who I am, that goes next to stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. Who I am and what can I be? This does not mean we expect all our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. Highlight the next 4 lines. A few of them may be, but with most of them we shall have to be content with patient improvement. The key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. So we're not going to get better overnight. We're going to have to, some people, you know, and I think Todd can relate to this. They come into the treatment center, and they have to be taught how to make their bed. They have to be taught simple things that they've never learned before. By cleaning up after themselves, they start to get a little bit of self-esteem back. So, you know, some of us come in here and we have no idea how to treat other people or even how to treat ourselves. And I know I'm a veteran of several halfway houses, and I mean that was one big thing. We had to teach people how to make beds and wash their dishes and treat other people. When you live with other people, you have to consider them. You can't just consider yourself. These are things that many people who come in here, they don't know. But once they start to learn them and practice them, they start to gain their self-esteem. Patient improvement, the key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. How many of us have this degree of readiness? In an absolute sense, practically nobody has it. The best we can do with all the honesty that we can summon is to try to have it. Even then, the best of us will discover to our dismay that there is always a sticking point. Underline always a sticking point. A point at which we say, underline, no, I can't give this up yet. And we shall often tread on even more dangerous ground when we cry, underline, this I will never give up. Next to this I will never give up, write the word warning. That's a warning. When we're saying never. Such is the power of our instincts to overreach themselves. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. No matter how far we have progressed, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. Some who feel they have done well may dispute this. So let's try to think it through a little further. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to underline and number the 7 deadly sins. So let's try to think it through a little further. Practically everybody wishes to be rid of his most glaring and destructive handicaps. No one wants to be so proud, underline proud and put a 1 above it, that he is scorned as a braggart. nor so greedy, underline greedy and put a 2 above it, that he is labeled a thief. No one wants to be angry enough to murder, underline angry and put a 3 above it. Lustful, underline and put a 4. Lustful enough to rape. Gluttonous, put a 5 above gluttonous, enough to ruin his health. No one wants to be agonized by the chronic pain of envy, underline envy and put a 6 above it, or to be paralyzed by sloth, underline sloth and put a 7 above it. Of course, most human beings don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. So we're going to write a mnemonic device. So off to the left, we're going to start with a big capital. So going down, write pride with a big P, and then underneath it, anger with a big A, greed with a big G, gluttony with a big G, envy with a big E, lust with a big L, and then sloth with a big S. So we're going to write them going down, and the mnemonic device is Paggles, P-A-G-G-E-L-S, right? So it's pride, anger, greed, gluttony, envy, lust, and sloth. And I mean, sometimes, when I'm out for a walk, if I can get out of work and go for a 15 or 20 minute walk around the building, sometimes I'll look, how am I doing with my pride? How am I doing with my anger? How about my greed? Greed is a big one for me. I'm a commissioned salesman. Greed and envy, man. Today, this guy walked past me, and I didn't feel like helping the guy, right? And I mean, so I walked past him, and it was a really busy day, and it was chaotic. And he walked up to a gal and said, "Hey, man, I need to place an order." And I mean, it was boom. She made like $500. So all of a sudden, I was like, "You idiot," and my envy and my greed, took over for about the next 20, 30 minutes. I'm like, how could I have done that, right? So these things, that little mnemonic device, we can see, how am I doing with pride? How about anger? How about greed? How about gluttony? How about envy? How about lust? How about sloth? Paggles, right? It's just something we can remember. We who have escaped these extremes, does everybody got it? Just write them down like that so you see Paggles right down the side there. We who have escaped these extremes are apt to congratulate ourselves, yet can we? Above what we're about to read, write the word warning. They're going to give us another warning. We who have escaped these extremes are apt to congratulate ourselves, yet can we? Highlight to the end of the paragraph. After all, hasn't it been self-interest pure and simple that has enabled most of us to escape? Not much spiritual effort is involved in avoiding excesses which will bring us punishment anyway. But when we face up to the less violent aspects of these very same defects, then where do we stand? Okay, so after where do we stand, let's write, am I connected to God? Am I connected to God? So they're telling us that, we're not going to do these things that might get us thrown in jail or fired or divorced. But can we really congratulate ourselves? There's many other little things that we still do. Am I connected to God? What we must recognize now is that we exult in some of our defects. Okay, we're gonna highlight to the end of the page and then the next 3 lines on 67. What we must recognize now is that we exult in some of our defects. We really love them. Who, for example, doesn't like to feel just a little superior to the next fellow, or even quite a lot superior? Isn't it true that we like to let greed masquerade as ambition? To think of liking lust seems impossible, but how many men and women speak love with their lips and believe what they say so they can hide lust in the dark corner of their minds? You can stop highlighting there. And even while staying within conventional bounds, many people have to admit their imaginary sex excursions are apt to be all dressed up as dreams of romance. So that stuff that we just highlighted, let's write, you spot it, you got it. Right? And what that means is, like at work, when I see people taking shortcuts, I go, how dare they do that? They can't take that shortcut. That's ridiculous. What if everybody does that? And then when I really think about it, I'm the top salesman there. All they're doing, they're mimicking me, right? When I see people doing stuff that I'm doing or that I do, for some reason I get angry about it. So you spot it, you got it. I mean, that happens all the time. We're going to highlight the whole next paragraph. Self-righteous anger. That's a big one. Self-righteous anger can also be very enjoyable. In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us, for it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. Gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination, has its satisfactions for us too. Here we are not trying to help those we criticize. We are trying to proclaim our own righteousness. Okay, so...
Like throwing somebody under the bus.
yeah, oh yeah. That paragraph, man. So let's draw a little line down to the bottom of the page from that paragraph we just read. And let's write, if they are not in the room, don't talk about them. Right? If they're not in the room, don't talk about them. Right? We got everybody gossips. I mean, I came in here, I said, oh, I never gossip about anything. You know, after I read this, I mean, I catch myself doing it all the time, but once I do, I stop. But if they are not in the room, you do not talk about them. And I mean, that self-righteous anger, I mean that's all of us. I mean, because we think we're a little bit better. I'm above them, right? I'm better than them. When gluttony is less than ruinous, we have a milder word for that too. We call it taking our comfort, right? We live in a world riddled with envy. Does everybody write that down? If they're not in the room, don't talk about them. That's important. We live in a world riddled with envy. To a greater or less degree, everybody is infected with it. From this defect, we must surely get a warped yet definite satisfaction. Highlight the next 5 lines. Else why would we consume such great amounts of time wishing for what we have not, rather than working for it, or angrily looking for attributes we shall never have, instead of adjusting to the fact and accepting it? You know, when I missed that sale today, I got real envious. I mean, I was like, if only I would have got that, right? I had to get myself out of that mindset. And how often we work hard with no better motive than to be secure and slothful later on, only we call that retiring. Highlight the next sentence. Consider, too, our talents for procrastination, which is really sloth in 5 syllables, right? I'll do it tomorrow. You know, I found that you work these steps, at least me, the hardest thing I got when I show up for work, I like to get that hardest thing done first. Or that hardest thing that I've got to do in a personal relationship, it's a lot better, I think, and a lot easier. We just take care of the hardest thing first. Things seem to go so much better when we do that rather than put that off. Nearly anyone could submit a good list of such defects as these, and few of us would seriously think of giving them up, at least until they cause us excessive misery. Some people, of course, may conclude that they are indeed ready to have all such defects taken from them, but even these people, if they construct a list of still milder defects, will be obliged to admit that they prefer to hang on to some of them. Therefore, highlight to the end of the paragraph, it seems plain that few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual and moral perfection. Okay, just go ahead and highlight to the end of the paragraph, but next to that line, aim at spiritual and moral perfection, next to that let's write easier, softer way. Easier, softer way. And that's going to come right after it. We want to settle for only as much perfection as will get us by in life, according, of course, to our various and sundry ideas of what will get us by. So the difference between the boys and the men, right, or the adults and the children, the ladies and the girls, is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective and for the perfect objective, which is God. So off to the left, let's write, thy will be done, not mine. Thy will be done, not mine. And then after the word God, let's write God in all my activities. You know, when I first got sober, I would be kind and I would think about spiritual things and God for 1 hour a day. right? But when I'm at work, I was Johnny selfish, greed. I come first, and I didn't understand, for several years, that I have to bring these principles with me throughout the entire day. And practicing these principles at home and at work is much harder than that 1 hour a day if you go to a meeting every day than when you're in these rooms. The hard part is at home and at work. God in all my activities. And I also discovered too, when the proverbial stuff is hitting the fan, that I can pause, I can go off to the corner, and I can say, God, I'm spiritually unfit. I need some help here, and breathe, right, and then go back at it. I can ask for God's help throughout the whole day. Many will at once ask, highlight the next 2 lines, how can we accept the entire implication of step 6? Why, that is perfection. This sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. Okay, I know we're doing a ton of highlighting. We're going to get to the end of the paragraph. This is so important stuff. Only step 1, where we made the 100% admission we were powerless over alcohol, can be practiced with absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals. They are goals towards which we look, and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. Seen in this light, step 6 is still difficult, but not at all impossible. The only urgent thing, and circle that word urgent, is that we make a beginning and we keep trying. And then underline keep trying too. Right? So that's when you hear people talk about doing the next right thing. That's what they're talking about, that we try. Right? That we try. If we would gain any real advantage in the use of this step on problems other than alcohol, highlight just the next 2 lines, we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. Okay, and again, next to that, right, become teachable. Become teachable. And I mean, I can't tell you guys, man, nobody could teach me anything. When I came in here, I knew everything at work, at home, and in these rooms. I was like, that's ridiculous. Today I have completely revolutionized. I will listen and I will say, my goodness, I never looked at it that way. And I will change my viewpoints. I'll listen and I'll learn. And that is such an important thing for us to do, to become teachable. We shall need to raise our eyes toward perfection and be ready to walk in that direction. It will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. Highlight that last little line. The only question will be, are we ready? Look again at those defects. Circle the word defects. We are still unwilling to give up. Okay, so at the bottom of the page, let's write, at peace with your 5th step, question mark. At peace with your 5th step, question mark. Again, I did 1 5th step, and then 6 months later I did a second one, and I was so happy that I did, because I had missed some stuff. At peace with your 5th step, question mark. And then also let's write, asponsi, are you ready? Right? And that means, are we ready to try to make patient improvement on these defects of character, right? Are we ready? Asponsi, are you ready?
To make what?
Well, just to make the patient improvement on our defects, right? I mean, are we ready to become willing? I guess you could say too. Right? It just says it will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. That means that we're going to stumble, we're going to fall, we're going to go backwards, right? The only question will be, are we ready? Right? Looking again at those defects we are still unwilling to give up, we ought to erase this hard and fast lines that we have drawn. Perhaps we should be obliged in some cases to say, this I cannot give up yet. But we should never say to ourselves, we should not say to ourselves, underline, this I will never give up. And again, next to that, write warning. That's a warning. Right? We've all got those things that we like. Let's dispose of what appears to be a hazardous open end we have left. Highlight the next sentence. It is suggested that we ought to become entirely willing to aim toward perfection, right? We can aim towards it. We're never going to get there, right? We note that some delay, however, might be pardoned. The word in the mind of a rationalizing alcoholic, okay, we better highlight that. That word in the mind of a rationalizing alcoholic could certainly be given a long-term meaning. Highlight that sentence, right? He could say, how very easy. Sure, I'll head toward perfection, but I'm certainly not going to hurry any. Maybe I can postpone dealing with some of my problems indefinitely. Right? Those are the people that they'll put off their fourth and their fifth step and they'll drink again. Right? Or they'll do it and then they look at these character defects and it does take work. And if we don't keep going forward, it's been my experience that people will drink again if we don't keep going forward in these steps.
Could that be another warning?
Yeah, you bet it's another warning. Maybe I can postpone dealing with some of my problems indefinitely. Yeah, I'm not going to bother with this. Pretty much we're going to just highlight to the end of the paragraph. Of course this won't do. Such a bluffing of oneself will have to go the way of many another pleasant rationalization. At the very least, we shall have to come to grips with some of our worst character defects and take action, circle action, toward their removal as quickly as we can. I had a lot of them at work where I was impatient. I had to come first. I put other people down. I insulted them. I had to take care of these things right away, and I did. I tried to, and I got to tell you that everybody at work. I found out that everybody at work had using the word extreme dislike is a euphemism. I was not a well-liked person. And today that has totally changed. People would never come and ask for my help. Today everybody does. It's quite a change. And that is through actively working on my character defects with how I treated other people. As quickly as they can. Again, we're gonna highlight the next 3 lines. Another warning: the moment we say no, never, our minds close against the grace of God. Delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. Obviously, highlight that, and that's a big warning. This is the exact point at which we abandon limited objectives and move towards God's will for us. Okay, so we're going to write something at the bottom of the page here. Step 6 points. And I'm going fast because we got a lot to go. We got to get through 7 too. Step 6 points. A, setting us up to help others. This is setting us up to help other people. And you know what? It's not only other alcoholics. It's people in our family and it's people at work. Setting us to help others. B, granted release from alcohol and or drugs if it applies. Granted release from drugs and or alcohol. For me, I could throw gambling in there too. So granted release from alcohol. And C, now turn towards working with others. And that does refer to other alcoholics. So A, setting us up to help others. B, granted release from alcohol. C, now turn towards working with others. Those are the step 6 points. Okay, we're on to step 7. Top of the page, we're going to write humbly. Oh, you know what? And if I didn't say it, a willingness was the principle for step 6, willingness. So at the top of where it says step 7, at the top of the page, write humbly mentioned 35 times. Humbly mentioned 35 times in this step 7 writing that we're going to read. And then we're going to write definition of humility, page 58. Humbly mentioned 35 times. Definition of humility, page 58. And then after 50, you can write 12 by 12, and we're going to go to page 58 and read that definition. Humbly mentioned 35 times. Definition of humility, page 58. So let's see what it says in page 58. We're going to go to the a third of the way down where it says another great dividend. Okay, so that's the first paragraph, third of the way down, page 58. We're going to go we're going to go 3 lines down, and we're going to highlight, if everybody's there, to those who made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. And next to that, write humility. Some of us come in here and we think we're the greatest thing on earth. Other people come in here and we think we're the worst thing on earth. And in either case, we're wrong. We're wrong, right? To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be, right? I'm becoming the person that I think I was meant to be through the working of these steps. Sincere attempt to become what we could be. So write humility next to that, and we'll go back to step 7, page 70. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Underline humbly and underline shortcomings. And after the word shortcomings, write 4th column. Right? All that work we did on our 4th step. The 4th column, right? What are the exact nature of my wrongs, faults, mistakes, defects, or my shortcomings? Right? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened, and inconsiderate. From those stem all defects of character. All of them stem from those. Right? So that's the 4th column, what they're talking about. Since this step so specifically concerns itself with humility, underline humility, we should pause here to consider what humility, underline humility again, is, and what the practice of it can mean to us. Indeed, we're going to highlight this whole paragraph here. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each AA's 12 steps. That's an important line there. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. Nearly all AAs have found, too, that unless they develop much more of this precious quality than may be required just for sobriety, they still haven't much chance of becoming truly happy. Without it, they cannot live so much useful purpose or, in adversity, be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency. Right? We're going to have some trials in our lives, right? And it's telling us that we had better have some humility or we're not going to make it through it. We're not going to make it through it. So at the top of that paragraph that we just highlighted where it says greater humility, right above that, write ego deflation. Ego deflation. Mine had to be punctured a little bit. Ego deflation. My problem is every time I would go through treatment, I would be really low because I would just have lost a job, maybe got out of jail, or something would have happened that was really bad. But as soon as I'd been sober for a month or maybe 2, and I had a new job and I was making money and I was excelling, my ego would come roaring back, and I would always say, I don't have to do this crap. I don't have to do these steps. I'll be fine without them. And no humility whatsoever, and I would always drink again. Humility, underline that word again. Humility as a word, that's why it's important, I think, when I'm working with somebody, and they're in detox, they get out, I want to get them working through these steps as quickly as possible. Because if they're anything like me, their ego is going to come roaring back, and after a month or 2 of being sober, they're going to say, I don't need to do this crap. I'm doing fine. Look at me, right? That's why I think it's so important to get people to go through these steps as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. Humility as a word and as an ideal has a very bad time of it in our world. Not only is the idea misunderstood, the word itself is often intensely disliked. Many people haven't even a nodding acquaintance with humility as a way of life. Much of the everyday talk we hear and a great deal of what we read highlights man's pride in his own achievements. Okay, next to that paragraph, I have reread often. Reread often. I got to remind myself that humility is not a bad thing. With great intelligence, men of science have been forcing nature to disclose her secrets. The immense resources now being harnessed promise such a quantity of material blessings that many have come to believe that a man-made millennium lies just ahead. Poverty will disappear, and there will be such abundance that everybody can have all the security and personal satisfaction he desires. Okay, we're going to write something at the top of the page. We're going to write, humiliation is a lesson. Humiliation is a lesson. Humility is a gift. Humiliation is a lesson. Humility is a gift. You know, people say, learn from your mistakes. My whole life, if I would have learned from my mistakes, I wouldn't be in AA. If I would have learned from any of my mistakes, I would have gotten better long ago. But you know, most of us alcoholics, we don't learn from our mistakes. We keep repeating them over and over and over and over. The theory, okay, we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. The theory seems to be that once everybody's primary instincts are satisfied, there won't be much left to quarrel about. The world will then turn happy and be free to concentrate on culture and character. Solely by their own intelligence and labor, men will have shaped their own destiny. Okay, after that, let's write, instincts are still out of control. Instincts are still out of control. So, you know, if everybody's taken care of in a perfect socialist or communist society, you know, hey, everybody's going to be great, but that's not the case, because we still have these instincts that are going to get us. Certainly no alcoholic and surely no member of AA wants to deprecate material achievement. Highlight the next 3 lines. Nor do we enter into debate with the many who still so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of life. And underline the belief. Next to that, write the lie. Right? Again, I mean, many of us, you know, if only I have a good wife, I have that good house, I got the big car, that's all I need to be happy. Right? Well, those things for me, they were never enough, and I needed more. I needed a bigger house. I saw what my neighbor had. He's got a nicer car. He's got a nicer suit. He's got a better looking girlfriend. It doesn't work. But we are sure that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics. Right? We screw it up more than others. So we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. For thousands of years, we have been demanding more than our fair share of security, prestige, and romance. Okay, next to those 3 words, write third column. That's the third column on our sheets again. When we seemed to be succeeding, we drank to dream still greater dreams. When we were frustrated, even in part, we drank for oblivion. Never was there enough of what we thought we wanted. After what we thought we wanted, write addicted to more. Addicted to more. If a little's good, a lot's got to be better, right? Yeah, one thing that alcoholics do, right? Sometimes when we're going through pain, you know, this great speaker that I heard, this woman, she said when we're going through pain, you know, some of us will go shopping, some of us will watch television, some of us will read. She said what we need to learn to do is something we've never done in our lives. We need to sit and we need to feel that pain. I mean, other people feel pain. We've been running from our whole lives. We need to learn how to feel that pain, right? When I first sobered up, I became a big shopper. I don't like to admit that, but it was true. Okay, so we're gonna highlight the next paragraph as well. In all these strivings, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap had been our lack of humility. Okay? We had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first, and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. Okay, that one right there, we also need to double underline that and put an asterisk next to it. We had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first. and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. You know, whenever I got out of treatment, the first thing I had to do, I had to get back to work because I needed money. Without money, I was a worthless person. If I didn't have money, a car, and a nice place to live, I was a lousy human being, right? That's what I thought. And I would always chase those things, and I would always drink again. I never worked these steps, and I never tried to practice in doing the next right thing. Quite characteristically, we had gone all out in confusing the ends with the means. Instead of regarding the satisfaction of our material desires as the means by which we could live and function as human beings, we had taken these satisfactions to be the final end and aim of life. If only I can get enough stuff, I'll be happy. If only I can get enough stuff. So at the bottom of the page, let's write something. Who are you helping? Who are you helping? And then let's write, are you praying/meditating? Develop new personality. Who are you helping? Are you praying, meditating? Develop new personality. Who are you helping? Are you praying, meditating? Develop new personalities. You know, one of the greatest things, when I sobered up, you know, for the first time in my life, I was able to buy a home. And, you know, right now, my friend Eric, who came here and talked on the 4-step, I mean, what a joy it is for me that I've got a place for him that he can stay. You know, and I don't charge him anything. He's in a bad way. And I mean, what a wonderful thing that is that I can do for another human being. And I don't want anything. I mean, it's an estimable act, and we do these things, we feel better about ourselves, right? And my whole life, I was in no position to help anybody. Never, not until I sobered up and I worked these steps. And, you know, now I am in a position to help other people, and that's what gives my life meaning today. True, most of us thought good character was desirable, but obviously good character was something one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. Okay, so at the top of the page, we're going to write something yet again. Developing spiritually or going back to defects? ? Developing spiritually or going back to defects? ? And all these speakers that I hear about, that I listen to, when they talk about step 6 and 7, they all talk about, wait till you've been sober for 6 or 7 years, you know, then you're going to hit the wall. You're going to hit the wall. So I got at least a half a year to go. They say when you hit that wall, you are going to have to dive into 6 and 7 with an urgency of a drowning man. And all these people are saying the same thing. And I guess I'm not there yet, but it's scaring me a little bit.
Why do they say that?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's 6 and 7. I mean, at some point they're saying that we are going to hit the wall, and we've got to dive back into these steps, and particularly steps 6 and 7. And I think they're talking about all of these lesser defects of character. But they say, don't worry. They say all you've got to do is you've got to do the next right thing. And they say if you keep trying to do the next right thing, you're going to be just fine. So they give us a little warning, but they give us an answer on what to do. And another definition of humility is coming up. This gal that just told me that. So let's we're gonna highlight. Are we with a proper? But obviously good character was something one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. From there, we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. And we're going to have another warning in there. Got it. With a proper display of honesty and morality, we'd stand a better chance of getting what we really wanted. But whenever we had to choose between character and comfort, okay, so above character, in tiny print, write challenge challenge and comfort above comfort, write easier, softer. Easier, softer. The character building was lost in the dust of our chase after what we thought was happiness. So again, next to that, write warning. Warning. And keep highlighting to the end of the paragraph. Seldom did we look at character building as something desirable in itself. Something we would like to strive for whether our instinctual needs were met or not. We never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. So we're going to put a little star next to that, and after daily, and write must. That's a must. We never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living, right? And put a must after that. And I mean, come on, we're never going to be there, but we can try. We can try to do the next right thing, and we can try to patiently improve. This lack of anchorage to any permanent values, this blindness to the true purpose of our lives, produced another bad result. Highlight the next 4 lines. For just so long as we were convinced that we could live exclusively by our own individual strength and intelligence, for just that long was a working faith in a higher power impossible. Right? So again, that's where we're going to run the whole show if we go back to the big book. Next to that, let's write, off to the left, write, as I become less, I get more in my life. As I become less, I get more in my life. I'm going to give you a real stupid example from my life. I mean, for years, drinking and using drugs or not, I have been the top salesman for my company. And we've gone through rapid expansion, and now there's like a couple thousand salesmen. And, 3 years ago, I was number 1. Last year, I was like number 3. Now I'm number 5. I used to get that number 1, I had to work 7 days a week. I mean, I had to do all of this stuff, and I did it because I thought it was so important. I thought if I wasn't the number 1 guy, that I wasn't a good person, that I didn't have value. And now it's like, hell yes, I'm taking that day off. Hell yes, I'm going to be doing this and this. There are things that are so much important. I used to never be able to take a day off. And now it's like, my God, I want more time off because I want to do these other things, right? I'm letting having to be number 1 that's gone. I don't need to do that anymore, right? In the back of my head, it would still be nice, but there's no way I'm going to put that as number 1 anymore. It's ridiculous. This was true even when we believed that God existed. We could actually have earnest religious beliefs which remained barren because we were still trying to play God ourselves. Okay, so above play God ourselves, write third step. Third step, write it in small print in there. And then we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. As long as we place self-reliance first, a genuine reliance upon a higher power was out of the question. That basic ingredient of all humility. Okay, this is another wonderful a definition of humility. A desire to seek and do God's will was missing. So that's another, this woman that I just listened to, she said, what a wonderful definition of humility. It's simply a desire to seek and to do God's will, right? Because that's not our will. What in this situation, what do I think God would want me to do, right? Not what does John want to do, what does John think is best? After where it says desire to seek and do, above that write action. That's an action. This is a program of action. People don't know what the hell's going on in our heads. They don't know if we're feeling depressed. They don't know if we're feeling angry. What they see is, what are we doing? How are we treating others? Right? How are we treating others? How are we acting? Are we going through life with grace and poise, or are we freaking out and stepping on toes? And we're going to highlight the next 3 lines. For us, this process of gaining a new perspective was unbelievably painful. It was only by repeated humiliations that we were forced to learn something about humility. Right? Some of us need to get thrown in jail and slapped around by the judge. It was only at the end of a long road marked by successive defeats and humiliations, highlight to the end of to groveling despair, and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency that we began to feel humility as something more than a condition of groveling despair. Right? So humility is not groveling despair. So we're going to write off to the left, let's write pray for willingness, page 76. Pray for willingness, page 76. And I'll be honest, that could be both the big book and the 12 and 12. And then at the bottom of the page, let's write not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. Another definition. Not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less.
One more time.
Not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. I mean, at work now, I treat everybody. We just, we just hired somebody who's, a low man on the totem pole working in our warehouse. I go up and I say, look, I want you to succeed here, and if there's anything I can do to help you out, I'm going to help you out. Right? We treat everybody decently, right? Not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. That's why they say that when you're helping somebody out, when you're helping a newcomer, I think Clancy, that if you ever listen to any of his speeches or tapes or whatnot, he said one of the good things when you're helping out a new person, he says, you're thinking about that poor son of a bitch, and then you point at yourself and you say, instead of this poor son of a bitch, right? Thinking of me less. Every newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous is told and soon realizes for himself, highlight the next two lines, that his humble admission of powerlessness over alcohol is his first step toward liberation from its paralyzing grip. All right, I got a Charlie horse going in my leg here. So at the top of the page, let's write, let God fix you. I shouldn't have got on that Stairmaster after work today, I'm telling you. Let God fix you. So it is that we first see humility as a necessity, but this is the barest beginning. Okay, we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. And a lot of this, guys, go back and reread this because it's so heady.
Yeah.
To get completely away from our aversion to the idea of being humble, to gain a vision of humility as the avenue to true freedom of the human spirit. To be willing to work for humility as something to be desired for itself takes most of us a long, long time. A whole lifetime geared toward self-centeredness cannot be set in reverse all at once. Rebellion dogs our every step. So again, to put an asterisk by those last 4 lines, that's a big one there. I mean, for me, not having to be number one at work is what a liberating experience. I get to do so many other things. But the other thing, not having to be right all the time. When I don't have to be right all the time, that frees me as a human. I mean, it's people that have to be right all the time, that's a tough way to live. Tough way. When we have finally admitted without reservation that we are powerless over alcohol, we are apt to breathe a great sigh of relief saying, well, thank God that's over. I'll never have to go through that again. Then we learn, often to our consternation, that this is only the first milestone on the new road we are walking. Still goaded by sheer necessity, we reluctantly come to grips, highlight the next 6 lines, with those serious character flaws that made problem drinkers of us in the first place, flaws which must be dealt with to prevent a retreat into alcoholism once again. We will want to be rid of some of these defects, but in some instances this will appear to be an impossible job from which we recoil. Okay, so where we first started highlighting with those serious character flaws, let's write 4th column again. So we can look back at our sheets that we did, look at the 4th column. And again, when I start taking shortcuts, when I start, I'm going to cheat on my taxes here, I'm going to do that. Once I start to do these things, I'm heading down a slippery slope And it's telling me right here that once I start to do these things again, that I'm probably going to retreat back into alcoholism, right? So that's why I want to always try to do the next right thing. Now we're going to see in step 10 when we get to it that we're going to make mistakes because we're human, but it's going to tell us what we do when that happens. And we cling with a passionate persistence to others which are just as disturbing to our equilibrium because we still enjoy them too much. How can we possibly summon the resolution and the willingness to get rid of such overwhelming compulsions and desires? Right? At the bottom of the page I wrote, change comes hard to us. Right? I wrote, change comes hard to John. Change comes hard to John. I used to be one of those guys, whenever anything changed at work or at home or anywhere, I did not like it at all. I wanted everything to stay the same. Change comes hard to us. But again, we are driven on by the inescapable conclusion which we draw from AA experience that we surely must, circle must, try with a will or else fall by the wayside. At this stage of our progress, we are under heavy pressure and coercion to do the right thing. We are obliged to choose between the pains of trying and the certain penalties of failing to do so. These initial steps along the road are taken grudgingly, yet we do take them. We may still have no very high opinion of humility as a desirable personal virtue, but we do recognize it as a necessary aid to our survival. Okay, so... But when we have taken a square look at some of these defects, write 4 next to that, have discussed them with another, write 5 on top of that, and have become willing to have them removed, write 6 above that, our thinking about humility commences to have a wider meaning. By this time, in all probability, we have gained some measure of release from our more devastating handicaps. Highlight the next sentence. We enjoy moments in which there is something like real peace of mind. We're going to get it. We're going to get these moments. Oh my God, I got peace of mind. To those of us who have hitherto known only excitement, depression, or anxiety, in other words, to all of us, highlight, this newfound peace is a priceless gift. Just that little bit there. Something new, indeed, has been added. Highlight to the end of the paragraph, where humility had formerly stood for a forced feeding on humble pie, it now begins to mean the nourishing ingredient which can give us serenity. Isn't that something? This improved perception of humility starts another revolutionary change in our outlook. Our eyes begin to open to the immense values which have come straight out of painful ego puncturing. Highlight the next sentence. Until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems. That woman that I just listened to said we've got to learn to sit and feel the pain. We fled from them as from a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. Escape via the bottle was always our solution. Character building through suffering might be all right for saints, but it certainly didn't appeal to us. So again, we're going to write something at the bottom of the page. This is very important, and this is true at home and at work as well as in these rooms. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. Right? And today at work was really stressful. Every salesperson that wasn't there, their customer came in and there was an issue and a problem, and I was running around like a chicken, right? And whenever I caught myself about to bitch, I just said, nope. I'm gonna do the next right thing, and I'm gonna keep going. I'm not gonna congratulate myself on what a great person I am. I'm just gonna do the next right thing. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. Okay, and then at the top of page 75, let's write, it's not odd, it's God. We are going to find so many things that happen to us when we sober up and start to live by these principles. And at first, oh my gosh, look at all these coincidences, right? It's not odd, it's God. All right, we're going to make it. Then in AA, we looked and listened. Everywhere we saw failure and misery transformed by humility into priceless assets. We heard story after story of how humility had brought strength out of weakness. In every case, highlight just this one little line, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. Next to that, write, gift of desperation. Gift of desperation. For some of us, the bottom is a little bit lower than others. But if you got an emotional bottom, that's I'm glad that you're here. God bless you. Let's do the work. gift of desperation. But this admission price had purchased more than we expected. It brought a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be a healer of pain. We began to fear pain less and desire humility more than ever. Okay, highlight the next 2.5 lines. During this process of learning more about humility, the most profound result of all was the change in our attitude towards God. Next to that, write spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening. And this was true whether we had been believers or unbelievers. Highlight the next 5 lines. We began to get over the idea that the higher power was a sort of Bush League pinch hitter to be called upon only in an emergency. Next to that, write foxhole. It's a foxhole prayer. Get me out of this one and I'll never do it again. The notion that we would still live our own lives, God helping a little now and then, began to evaporate. Right when I took the third step, I offer myself, to thee, to build, or the third step prayer. I was like, well, you take the booze, but I'll take the money and sex. Don't mess with that, right? Many of us who thought ourselves religious awoke to the limitations of this attitude. Refusing to place God first, we had deprived ourselves of His help. But now the words, highlight, of myself I am nothing, the Father doeth the work, just that little bit, began to carry bright promise and meaning. We saw we needn't always be bludgeoned and beaten into humility. It could come quite as much from our voluntary reaching for it as it could come from unremitting suffering. A great turning point in our lives came when we sought for humility. Highlight that. A great turning point in our lives came when we sought for humility as something we really wanted rather than as something we must have. Okay? Just that little bit. It marked the time when we could commence to see the full implication of step 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. We're going to write something at the bottom. God reveals more to me the more I seek Him. God reveals more to me the more I seek Him. God reveals more to me the more I seek Him. Okay, top of page 76, we're going to write again 2 objectives. 2 objectives. 1, live at peace with ourselves and our fellows. 2, God can do for us what we can't. Live at peace with ourselves and our fellows. God can do for us what we can't. And we're going to read that right there, but it's good to write it so we read it. Live at peace with ourselves and our fellows. God can do for us what we can't. As we approach the actual taking of step 7, it might be well if AA inquire once more just what our deeper objectives are. There they are. So put a 1. Each of us would like to live at peace with himself and his fellows. And then 2 in front of we would like to be assured that the grace of God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. We have seen that character defects based upon short-sighted or unworthy desires are the obstacles that block our path towards these objectives. We now clearly see that we have been making unreasonable demands upon ourselves, upon others, and upon God. Our expectations, man. So we're going to highlight the next paragraph. The chief activator of our defects, okay, this is what causes us to create pain and suffering for others. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Primarily fear, put a 1, that we would lose something we already possessed. I'm going to lose my house, my car, my job, my wife, my freedom. Or 2, would fail to get something we demanded. I deserve that new lake home. I deserve that promotion. I deserve this new girlfriend, right? But I'm afraid I'm not going to get it. And if I don't get it, I'll never be happy. Okay, so highlight to the end of the paragraph there. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands and underlying unsatisfied demands, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to anyone, right? So, I always tried to go after... I was never happy with what I had, you work these steps and then you learn to be happy with what you've got, right? You're grateful for what you have.
Underline the next 4 lines. The 7th step is where we make the change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves towards others, towards God. The whole emphasis on step 7 is on humility. Underline humility. It is really saying that we now ought to be willing to try humility in seeking the removal of other shortcomings, just as we did when we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope. Highlight the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. Okay, so then you can write 7-step promises. That's a promise there. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. I came here to quit drinking, and this solved all of my issues, or helps to solve them. Okay, so I'm going to read some stuff real quick here. Then we'll say the 7-step prayer and get out of here. So in step 4, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. The first task is to become honest with ourselves, with others, and with our higher power. That's step 5. So we must do the 6th and 7th step right after the 5th step. Now, my old toolbox, when I'm using, was to lie, cheat, steal, con, manipulate, to get what I thought I wanted, what would make me happy. So if I'm going to get rid of my selfishness, how in the hell can I get what I want? I'm a salesman. If I get rid of my dishonesty, how can I make a living? If I get rid of my fear, how can I face life? If I consider other people above me, who's going to take care of John? God will do for me what I cannot do for myself, but God will not do for me what I can do for myself. So with selfishness, I must practice selflessness. With dishonesty, I must kick myself and try to be honest in every situation. With my fear, I must practice courage and do stuff I'm afraid to do. And I must consider others, I didn't think I'd have any personality left when I got rid of these defects, What made me me. But when I get rid of my flaws and defects, God lets the opposite flow in. So my mental habits must be broken by working against myself with God's help. This is a partnership with God. I have to try to be more honest, more giving, more considerate. I've got to cast aside my old ideas and let the new ones take over. 6 and 7 are tools of change and acceptance. 2 little sentences in the book, but perhaps the 2 biggest steps that we can work. So, I got a little bit more. I'll do it next week. Let's go to the page 7-step prayer. Where are we here? We're on the top of page 76. Okay, so I'm going to read the first paragraph. If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. That's a prayer right there. That's a 6-step prayer. God, please help me be willing to let this crap go. When ready, we say something like this. We're going to end with a 7-step prayer from now on. We're taking it right now, guys. My Creator, everybody, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness, you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. All right, we're done with step 6 and 7. We're moving.